why are CSVs still around even if we have more efficient file format like Parquet? And where CSV is still playing a crucial role in our data stack? Well, that's what we are going to answer today with Pedro from DuckDB Labs. And we'll even show you a pragmatic example, and you can see that you can basically throw anything at it and it will parse it nicely for you. But should you throw such a bad CSV in the first place?
Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Pleasure to be here. I'm very thankful for Matt's invitation. Unfortunately, I love to talk about CSV files and parsing, so here I am.
Unfortunately, yeah. I bet you've been rocking at parties, right? When you talked about that.
Yeah, man. What can I say? People just started showing their weird stuff to me. It's oh, this is the files I'm handling. But people actually get super passionate because sometimes I start showing kind of what I believe are weird files, and then someone in the room, wow, once I was in this company and I saw this, and that. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's even more weird, I guess.
Can you please give us a few line intro about you and your background? So you are at DuckDB Labs. Maybe I should give some context because we get often the confusion. I get it. Do you get it about MotherDuck and DuckDB?
Absolutely. It's very common that people think it's the same company.
Yes, so DuckDB Labs is actually a different company from MotherDuck. MotherDuck is the US-based company which shipped DuckDB in the cloud. And DuckDB Labs, well, Pedro is going to tell us all about it and what is it you're doing at DuckDB Labs?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, DuckDB itself, it started kind of this project at the research center called CWI, Centrum Visconde Informatica, and stands for like Center of Mathematics and Computer Science. It actually started by one of my best friends, Mark Rasveld, and we were PhD students together. So I did some things in and out at the time, but then after a few years, Mark and his supervisor, Hannes, realized they could actually create a company on top of that. They were starting to have some commercial interest. People were using this product. There was still somewhat new and very academic. So they started DuckDB Labs basically to provide more official commercial support to the DuckDB software. And I was still around CWI at the point, so I basically joined the DuckDB Labs from the get-go. So from day one, I think there were already 4 or 5 people.
Wow. So really from the start, right? And working with Mark, which is acting, now more as a CTO, right?
Yeah, Mark is absolutely the CTO, the person that approves anything that gets in. I can every now and then peer pressure him a little bit to merge my stuff. I know if I really want it, but no, he's the guy, he's the CTO of the company today. Basically, that means it decides the technologies we adopt, a lot of the things we do and implement and whatnot.
Yeah. And so when actually the story of CSV came with DuckDB, was it from the start?
So this is actually kind of a funny question to me specifically, because DuckDB was maybe 3 weeks in, and I kind of joke 3 weeks from the start, but 3 weeks of Mark programming, that basically means 3 years in a real company. So although I was very much in an early stage, I could already do stuff like aggregations and groupings, projections. It had support already for SQL to a certain degree, had all these steps of logical plans, physical plans, optimization and whatnot. And then at that point, I was like, oh, this is starting to be a pretty cool project. I'm going to contribute with something, but I also want to contribute with something that's fairly easy. So I decided to go with a CSV reader. And not only because I wanted to do something easy, but also because at that point, if you think about that, you can already run aggregations and groupings. You can already do a few TPC-H queries. So TPC-H is this famous important benchmark for data analysis. And because we were researchers, we're okay, we kind of really want to know if these operators are going the right direction of performance. And at the time, basically, the generator of the data would produce CSV files, TSV actually, because they are tab separated. And then we just needed a way of ingesting that. So I actually coded the very first copy from and copy to of DuckDB. And basically at the time I just, like if I think about the actual implementation, maybe it took me 3 days. Most of it was like building the logical plan, physical plan, transformer kind of stuff. The actual CSV parsing took me 20 minutes. So, and of course it sucked. It was like very slow, very brittle, could only really handle like super well constructed CSV files with no like new line in quotes, quoted new lines. Um, so yeah, so for our purpose, which was loading TPC-H data, was perfect. So actually, my implementation stayed around for like a year and a bit.
Yeah. No, so that's impressive, like how, small critical feature can stay in a product, so I mean, bootstrap it quickly and stay over there, for a pretty long time, right? Because
Yeah,
I
no,
guess like
absolutely.
that was the entry point from people when, like, how, because I was not there. Like, what time frame are we talking here?
We're talking 2018, right? So
Yeah.
at that point, basically we were the only ones using it. It was also like kind of a free for all. We didn't really have any structure. It was as academic as you can imagine, just like pushing stuff to main and hoping that everything goes correctly. So this is like pre any kind of release. That there was nothing there yet. And because the only purpose was to load this specific type of data, and like I basically didn't care for performance, I literally wrote like the simplest CSV reader you could imagine. And that was fine because basically it was using our CI, maybe some benchmarking, and what we were actually interested in benchmarking was not the loader. And only when it actually, I think it was either the first or the second release, somewhere there's like, okay, maybe we need to rewrite it to be a bit more careful and have a bit more focus on performance, have a bit more focus on what are we actually bringing from the file to memory, like these kind of smaller details. So that's why, like I say, it took a year, but it's also a year that we are basically the only ones kind of using it.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned unit tests, right? CI, and I think this is. I'm curious what the audience, where the audience is. Like, people are still using CSV. Maybe we can dive on that. But this is one use case I still do see a lot. Like, typically small unit testing and for CI. Do you
Yeah.
do you still use CSV within the DuckDB repo for that?
Um, so in a way, I'm not sure if you ever or the audience may have had seen the way we test DuckDB. We basically have what's called SQL test. You have a query and you validate that the result of the query is correct. That result is actually a CSV.
Yeah.
So basically, it's used kind of all the time there. And you can think like, oh, I mean, these guys are data engineers and they're using CSV. Well, why are they not like doing Parquet result checking or whatever? Well, the reason for that is because if you look at these test files, you'll see that all these results are handwritten. And handwriting a CSV file is like super easy. But how do you handwrite a Parquet file? You don't, right? Basically, a system generates that. It becomes like a plot. You cannot interpret that with a text editor or whatever. And basically, another system can read it. But as a human, you can't read it too much.
Yeah, and that's very true. And I've been doing that, and I know a lot of data engineers still doing this for that specific reason. Especially if you write unit tests, you want a quick feedback loop, right? So even if you have a tool for writing to Parquet or whatsoever, no, you want to be able to, write a specific case and then, assert the case quickly as you go to code. So this is still, this is still a common like standard, or people, at least in the Python world, I know, they're more going into the data frame approach. So they basically, coding the data structure over there without, using the CSV. But it has pro and cons, and I think it's depending on your use case, because sometimes you can have side effect with arrow changing, certain type, where if you want specifically to try to test something against source data on CSV, then it's there is nothing better than handwriting. You mentioned the benchmark TPC-H. Can we quickly talk a bit about this, because I'm familiar with it, but just in terms of research, there is different kind of data set, right? Used in TPC. So can you elaborate a bit on that? Like why do you pick specifically, the TPC-H? And and a bit more. Maybe I can share. There is an official website, which is just tpc.org, right? Where you have basically all the information and I believe the download of the data set. But can you tell us a bit more about the different kind of data set we can have there?
Absolutely. So I think for data analysis specifically, there's two benchmarks that are very much used in research, TPC-H and TPC-DS. So basically there's a committee that defines exactly the queries of these benchmarks and how the data looks like, and all sorts of distributions of the data, right? And the reason that TPC-H is very popular, for example, is that you have a limited number of queries. I think you have 21 queries. But these queries, although limited in quantity, they are very diverse in terms of the operators and the things they test, right? So, for example, we have queries, the query 6, whereas basically you only have aggregations. So you're doing like sums and averages and whatnot of one table. So this is basically you're like, okay, how fast your system is on that query will define how fast you can do aggregations. But you have query 1 that's now aggregations with groupings. So you have now this one extra operator that you also need to check. And then you have all sorts of queries that will test like join order, that will test correlated subqueries. So basically all these operations that are important for analytics. And then TPC-DS is kind of like TPC-H on steroids. So you have like, I don't know, maybe over 100 queries. And then you get more information about it. And of course, these are benchmarks, right? Like the thing that makes them special to academia is because there was a whole committee defining it. And that's why you don't really see that many papers on internet designed benchmarks or company designed benchmarks. They usually don't get really popular in academia because it's mostly like one company that thought that was interesting, but that was never vetted by a group of people.
Yeah, that's a good point. That it's actually a way for people to do benchmark against their tool in competition, right? So we've seen all the place where we compare apples to apples. But what's the downside of those benchmarks? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, the reality is that especially when you're doing system comparison, that's super difficult. Systems are optimized in different ways. Performing these benchmarks is extremely not easy. And that's also why the way this comp like TPC-H want to be actually properly vetted, you have to pay them a lot of money to get like their stamp saying these are your actual benchmark numbers.
I see.
Because it's super complex. So, I mean, anyone can run it and report whatever they want, right? But to get the actual vetted results is quite complex.
Can you tell us a bit, like you mentioned when you started the first, CSV load for DuckDB? What is, like, in a nutshell, the storyline, from 2018 when you started to now? How does the things looks different?
Absolutely. So 2018, I did this first implementation. In 2019, so I basically touched this and I didn't touch CSV files until like last year, right? Like CSV reader. I was kind of doing some other stuff. But in 2019, Mark, I re-implemented parts of it. So you basically added buffers to the file. So now you read the file to actually buffers in memory. And that gives you a lot of control of which pieces of data are actually in memory. And he implemented a bunch of different optimizations to make the parsing more efficient. I think it got like 5x faster or something like this than my original naive implementation. Then I think like in 2020, Theo, that used to be a master's student at SWI, now it's a developer at MotherDuck, actually implemented the CSV sniffer. And the CSV sniffer, I think, is super interesting, and I think that makes CSV files much more readable and the whole process more easily because it's a piece of code that's able to detect column names, column types, to detect if certain rows are dirty, to detect the CSV options, right? The limiters, quotes, what is the escape. So the user doesn't have to do that manually. And I kind of joke that Theo did that kind of in the Woodstock era of DuckDB because we start like getting all these CSV files that don't conform to any norms, like all kind of crazy stuff. And then it's like, okay, you need to solve the Woodstock error, so you kind of need to go in this direction. Um, and it's also a joke that's the CSV option explosion error because I think we used to have like maybe 5 options for CSV reading. So basically, like the limiter quote escape has a header, and the column types are actually inferred by the table created already. And then I think like from these 5 options, you ended up like with 30 options, right? So if you open like the docs of DuckDB today, you see like there's basically like a huge list. Um, since I'm currently maintaining, I'm a bit more annoying into adding new options. So every now I joke that I get like about 2 requests a month, and I'm like, I don't know if we really need this option. So,
But that's a good point because I feel like as a data engineer, I sometimes and say hi in the chat if you feel that in a way where you build a lot of rules to either prevent, basically be able to parse bad data sets,
yeah,
but at the very end, the best way to fix it is to fix it upstream, right? To have
no,
nice data sets. So of course, when you build a database, you need to have, such a feature, but within a company, you rather go talk to the producer if you can. Of course, that's not always possible, right? But to say, hey, can you actually do something better than that? There is 2 things to scare a data engineer, by the way, is FTP server and CSV. And those 2 combined with Excel sheet, I would say I like that. That's like the bingo jack. But I totally agree that I think maybe you're confronted to such a decision where you're building, really deep custom rules, and you think like, is it really worth it, or is it other kind of features that have been?
so for like CSV options specifically, of course, it really helps that there has been like an excellent tool for CSV parsing for many years, right? Pandas.
Yeah.
Like everyone from Python have used Pandas for the past few years. So it's usually like if someone is asking me something, I'm like, okay, what does Pandas do? Do they have this option? Do they ignore it? So it ends up becoming a great API reference in that sense, right? And I think the other 2 questions I ask myself before deciding to implement something is, can I do I already have this option in a different way? Like can I already have the same results by setting a different option or a different combination of options? And then also how many people are asking. So if there's like a random guy with a very specific use case, that's probably something that I'm not gonna having a look immediately at least.
Yeah, I see. Um, Another fun story that I saw online is this tweet, right, from Hannes. Hello, Hannes, if you're watching the stream, by the way, which is the creator, the co-creator of DuckDB with Mark that we just mentioned. He mentioned that Rabobank, which is a Dutch bank, right, is export CSV do not escape double quote, which make it impossible to correctly read those files. I think that's something. So I think there is a lot of things to unpack there. The first thing is that I'm guessing I'm not the only one that wants their financial data, in a clear way. So if you've been struggling with like exporting your financial data, even like on big banks, it's totally pretty common actually. But I think the most scary part is the reply, right? Uh, can we touch down on that? Why do you think they reply on this, and why did they mention Excel actually?
I mean, I think the reason for that it's of course I mean I'm gonna go over with a couple assumptions here, but I imagine that Saskia is a person that's that's not completely related to IT or programming or not none of this, right? So it's just also I imagine that if you're not a person that's ingesting these files through a system and trying to really like reach peak performance, opening them in Excel is perfectly valid. And the reason that you can really open kind of like extremely broken CSV files in Excel is because there's no restrictions in your schema in any case. Like you can have columns with multiple data types. You can have columns that meet rows that miss columns or have extra columns or whatever. You can even have CSV files with multiple tables. You're gonna be able to open this in Excel, right? So I imagine that for someone that's completely outside this field, is like how do you have problems opening this? Like just use Excel. Uh, it sounds funny to us. And it also sounds like interesting that you see, for example, that this is kind of a basic error. Like, are you not quoting,
Yeah.
escaping your quotes, right? Like, how can this happen? But like, I'm pretty sure that Rabobank has a CSV exporter, but not an importer. You cannot import new transactions and give you more money. So you don't have to write a writer. You don't really like these things are easy to miss if you're not super familiar with the file formats, and if you don't actually ever like try to write a reader, right?
Yep.
So I understand these errors. I thought it was hilarious when I saw this as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you mentioned. I think there is 2 points here really interesting. Is that Excel is really allow a lot of freedom for good and bad, right? So at the end, you mentioned that this person was probably not technical, right? As you like hypothesis that someone managing the support on the social.
Absolutely.
But the answer at the end is still correct, right? It is like, it sounds stupid, right? But it's also easy. It's like, yeah, why would you not load it in Excel? And probably, I think companies and maybe people like Saxia should have lower technical barrier to entry with other tool, right? Because I mean, DuckDB is really awesome, and I would use it any time of the day to analyze my financial data. But that's not so easy than approachable than Excel, right? Have you thought about that a bit, like around DuckDB itself, and how people are using CSV? What kind of user are using it, and do we need to make a simple interface for DuckDB? I don't know. I'm just brainstorming here.
I like a visualizer because I think about the thing that makes Excel Excel in this use case is because they have this NoSQL-ish thing, right? Which DuckDB can't have. DuckDB has a relational database. Is very much against this Woodstock kind of vibe. You need like things very well defined. They all need to fit in square in a way, right? It's just so you have to give up this freedom to reach performance. It's simply the way it works. You cannot have both. So this is one thing, and the other one, of course, like Excel is an excellent visualization tool. It's really focused on that. We have, I think, people that are building, in a way, visualization tools using DuckDB. I don't have like a name popping up my head, but I've seen it around. That could maybe fill in this role, but I think it's also like Excel just allows you to do whatever you want. Like you can change cells to whatever you want. You can, again, like you can have in the same sheet more than one table. Like, and I feel like as a user, this is of course extremely powerful if you don't really care about performance. Like if your sheet has like a couple thousand lines, like do you really care about like really crunching these numbers as fast as possible? Probably not. You care that you managed to do it. I think that becomes the more important part there.
No, I kind of have a love and hate relationship with Excel and actually CSV. Like in general, I hate Excel, but they love them. We ended up always getting them, around the data ecosystem. And there is a lot of like still government, public data sets that's using, Excel and CSV heavily. And I think, again, it's just a matter of of usage, it's easy, you can drop it. So it's one big answer takeaway probably for this session is that, CSVs also kind of link it into the Excel, which is has a huge baseline of user, and the way that people communicate sometimes with IT department from an Excel sheet is often through CSV, unless you've seen something else.
No, I fully agree. I think especially when you don't have like a, let me just get Ubi because it's
Oh, and it might be a good time to introduce him. So this is your pilot for coding.
This is the barking analyst. He's the reason I work actually to pay the bills for him. But no, so absolutely. I think like a lot of this data ends up being generated by Excel or by hands or by systems that end up having the only way of exporting data as CSV files. I think it's also another big point of CSV files is that if they are well constructed, it's pretty easy to write a parser for them, right? Like as I said, I did it like in half an hour. Not a great one, but if you're like starting a system, like you can kind of believe that any system will read CSV files.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's becoming also true that you can kind of expect that most systems will read Parquet files. But even I think like a few years back, that would not be the case.
Yeah. No.
It's just kind of this guarantee that anyone can operate with this.
Yeah, indeed. And I'm wondering, like, I mean, that's we are really going too far into the discussion. But if there will be one day maybe a better file format that has all the benefit of CSV, all the benefit of Parquet, but file format is always a compromise, right? But
I can tell you my beliefs.
Yeah, go ahead if you have some thought of that. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think like CSV files will stay here forever. There will always be this mess, and it's just kind of like a deal with it. Like if my grandma can open a CSV file and change it, that thing is not dying. And then if you go to something like as a Parquet file, that's a performance-driven file format. So basically, why is Parquet interesting? Because data is stored in a color format. So if you have an analytical engine, you can access faster. And it does a bunch of different smart combinations of compression algorithms to make it smaller. And you also have partition information, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, all these performance-driven techniques can change, right? Like next year, maybe someone at CWI, for example, develops a new compression algorithm for floating point numbers. Actually, they did it this year, last year. And now this becomes interesting for a file format because you can compress it a bit further. So I don't think that Parquets will be here like in the next 10 years, for example. It will be something else. Maybe a Parquet 2.0 or whatever. But I think CSV files will always be here, more or less in the format they are, because it's just like they already completely fulfill that spectrum of being very visual, very easy to use. You can open anywhere. It's just a text file.
Yeah. Okay, but that's a good outtake. Let's talk in 10 years. If you still maybe working on the CSV parser, but no, but I think it's an interesting outtake that Parquet will not be there in 10 years, but CSV will remain. And I think it's fair, giving just how certain government and entities use data today and will not probably adapt those kind of file formats. So before we're gonna dive a bit into some CSV example, last thing I want to talk is about this tweet, another tweet. Yeah, I've been spying on you, Pedro. That's the thing. No, I think it was interesting because you were talking about lecture you were doing, and basically someone asked, so I don't understand why you don't integrate with your existing tool rather than building your own parser from scratch. Can you give a bit, like you answer here, but go a bit more into that?
I think first off, this is a totally valid question, right? Like, why reinvent the wheel if you have something that's good enough and that's out there? And I gave there a couple reasons, right? Like, so first off is that the DuckDB by philosophy or design is supposed to be this very lightweight dependency-free tool. So we are very careful. Like we do have dependencies in a way, but they get in lines. And inline head dependency can be a very difficult process, and it becomes also very difficult to update it. So you get kind of like this static dependency. It's a bit problematic. So this is why one of the reasons before we decide if we really need that piece of library, if it's really going to save us time, if we're never going to modify it, then it becomes pretty good. So for example, we have an inline extension for time zones, like, okay, there's a pretty good extension that deals it. We're not going to modify it. It gets inline. So the other reason is that in DuckDB, of course, you have a binding process. So that in this binding process is when you define, at the very least, the column name and types. And later on, you start actually reading the file. So how can you extract this binding information from real tools? Becomes very problematic. Do they even do something about it? Do they sniff it? I'm not sure. The third reason I gave was vectorized query execution. So in DuckDB, the execution is vectorized, which basically means that you go through small chunks of the table all the time. And that's very important because it enables cache locality, and basically it ends up like eliminating a huge bottleneck of data analysis. And then like you need to be able to also process your data on these chunks. So I mean, memory management, again, like DuckDB, it runs like in these very limited memory scenarios, right? Like maybe you can only spare like a couple hundred megabytes of your memory or whatever. So you do need like a pretty fine-grained control of what you bring into memory, what you're keeping, what you're removing. How do you do this if there's another library that's actually having full control of the file access and what gets in there? And I can think of more like 15 reasons, but I think these are the more.
No, that's some valid one, and I think the dependencies has been appreciated in general in the data ecosystem, because the general data ecosystem at the macro level, so tooling or software, is already deeply integrated for sometimes bad, because when something doesn't work with other things, there is an update. And then as you go lower into that stack, right, from the, I would say, vendors to programming language and, database, then that's true that it's really nice that you just install DuckDB with a binary, it runs, and it has all the dependency installed. So we have about 15 minutes. What about diving into some example of what's DuckDB is capable of parsing? So I'm not sure, should we build the CSV example together? Do you see my screen correctly?
Yeah, gonna see it.
Zoom out this, we don't need this. So I have a DuckDB shell installed, and I have a file here, else.csv. So what do you suggest? Do you have actually example to share? And I think one reference that we can give to the people trying out DuckDB is that there is the documentation with the CSV import. There is also a page for, let me open that, the CSV exports, which is just through a copy statement. And then there is also a blog that you share, and the blog is this one, was already back in October, where you talk about the DuckDB CSV sniffer. So that's on the DuckDB website. You go on the blog. I'll share it directly on the comment section if you want to know more. But let's go a bit into coding back here. So what do you suggest we start?
I mean, we can just start with a very simple file, right? Like if we go to how, maybe just create 3 columns. Let's say name, age, and height, or whatever. Doesn't really matter. And then we can just create like a couple rules for that. Oh, perfect. Oh, wow, that's magic, man. What is that?
That's my Copilot. So you have the dog, and I have the Excel, Copilot. It's just VS Code Copilot.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so that's
Which is really fun because you can try to see, when you put some comments or whatsoever, if you pull up some secrets like AWS secrets, and because there is this just a small parenthesis where on what GitHub Copilot has been trained, and there is a lot of leaked AWS keys, for example, yeah, exactly. So no, but I tried some time of that, but you can play around if you want, like, for example, let's see, AWS key, AWS. Yeah, so you see it's gonna revert, and then okay, here is more maybe probably the thing is that, but I already like kind of like create just a data set with like AWS key. Are they real or not? But yeah, that was just a small parenthesis for fun. Let's come back to this. So yeah, we had two lines.
Absolutely. Lines, and then if we just so I explained, like, you have this whole sniffer, this whole thing, so you really have to set up nothing, hopefully. So if we do just on the SQL from and then the path between single quotes, we should be able to get our results.
Yeah. And can you tell us a bit what's happening behind the scene here? So I just did, so this is my SQL. So I just did this, but I didn't specify any function. So what's happening behind the scene?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what's happening here is that during the binding phase, basically when we're constructing the query plan, we already figure out what the table looks like, right? So in this case, the sniffer will go for our CSV file is very small, but we go for about the first 20,000 rows, and we'll try to figure out their types. So it says, for example, okay, the first column is John and Jane, so of course a string. The second column is numbers, so it's an int 64, and the third column is, of course, like, it has a dot there, so it's obviously a double. And then basically we go for the first 20,000 lines. It tries to figure out and basically tries these types all the time, right? So it starts like with a Boolean value and things like, okay, can John fit in a Boolean value? Oh no. Okay, can John fit in an integer? Oh no. Can John fit on a double? Or no, and so on and so forth until you end up with the bar chart. And also during this process, you identify things like what is being used for the delimiter, right? So in our example, we have comma, but we could have, I don't know, a tab, right? A pipe, whatever, a value that would also be identified. It also identifies what the quote value is. So here we have a double quote, but if we also had a single quote, that would be totally fine. And one way you can see this is that I've implemented this function called snip CSV. So if you just add snip CSV before the path, no, just from,
yeah,
and then it snip CSV, SNIFF, SNIFF underscore CSV, yeah, and then have the path in parentheses.
Yeah.
This function basically runs only the sniffer part, the part that detects like all these things, and returns to us like all the values, right? So for example, returns, oh, this is the linker that we detected, this is the code we detected, and it has like 11 columns, so like all these kind of options that the sniffer goes through.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of it is that also returns you the prompt that you can use disabling the sniffer.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So one reason that might be interesting is that if you have a CSV file, that sniffer is very expensive. You just get the prompt with the sniffer turned off, and things go faster.
Okay. Oh, that's yeah. I'll learn something new. I think something maybe it's worth to mention also, because I've seen that improving over the years, that there is a hook, directly within DuckDB to detect that it's a CSV file. What's happening? Yeah. So
that's a bit easy, actually. It just looks at the extension.
Okay, but also is loading. So the necessary extension, if you need any, depending on the DB case file format, because I think that's something. When I show that to people, I say, "Oh, this is magic." But what if I want to pass some function? I'm reading a Parquet, whatsoever. It says no. That's like kind of a generic entry point where you don't need to specify anything, and the magic is happening. But we can also basically go to the read CSV, and if I'm going back to the documentation, so we have this basically specify here. We can specify the delimiter, header, columns, and so forth.
Yeah. So that's also exactly what that prompt part will return to you.
Yeah.
Because we did see it because it gets collapsed, but it basically return like the column definitions and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I do select prompt, this, and maybe I can do multiplying so that we see it. So this is what is being returned, right?
Yes. So all these options that you see here, delimiter, quote, escape, what is the new line? This skip is how many rows you skip from the beginning of the file. So for example, if in our first rows we just have like random comments, it will detect this is probably dirty. So it skips for us the header and the columns, names, and types.
Yeah. Indeed. So yeah, let's break some stuff and see what else is able like to. So we started with a really simple use case, right? So so now let's see what is possible.
Yeah. So one thing that's common, for example, is that if you have a column that's missing, a row that's missing a column, right? So you just have the name and the age. That of course should throw an error to us because then you're missing a value. What do you do, right?
So something like that.
Something like that. No, just an age instead of the height, whatever, 30.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So instead of if you remove 165, like the last column.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And the comma.
Yeah.
So this is basically a file now that the second, the first row of data has 3 columns and the second row of data has 2 columns, right? So actually, because RSDFer is also built in a way that tries to not break it, this time when you run the from LCSV, it basically thinks everything is just one column. So the first row will have 3 columns, the second row will have 3 columns, but it just thinks like it's all one.
Yeah.
So to actually force it to break, you need to define the limiter in our query. So to do that, yeah.
So read CSV.
Perfect. And then I think it's the lim, or where's the full one?
So this is all. I don't use.
It's just the lim, DILIM, yeah, and then exactly.
Sorry, I'm resuming a lot, so that's why I'm just gonna do like this. So I think let me double check. Yeah, it's just dealing like this. And if I have a typo, so invalid CSV when sniffing file.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's basically saying that with this delimiter we're giving, it cannot auto-detect the other options because now with this delimiter we're gonna have this issue, right?
Okay.
But if we add, for example, an option ignore errors equal true, hopefully our broken line will be skipped.
So this is the option.
Yeah. Let's hope it works. Yeah, so now we just got the first row because the second row of data, of course, breaks it. But one thing that's also very common on this type of CSV files where we're missing a column is that people want them just to be notepadded. And notepadding basically means that you replace the missing value of the columns with no. So if instead of ignore errors, you have notepadding, you get that effect as well. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that we also have like a lot of options to try to allow you to engage
Yeah.
with these
But
different files.
what I'm curious, what happening if I have another row like this? Will it put the two rows or just the first one and stop? Oh,
Well,
so that's
so yeah,
beautiful because like this is something where you have pretty common in CSV to have one row out of like thousand, which is broken for weird behavior, right? And it's
yeah,
breaking
exactly.
your full pipeline. So uh, that's interesting. And so if I do, you mentioned, can I know, is there, sorry, a way to know which line is problematic? Because here it was saying,
Yeah. So the reason that we're not getting the line number there is because this error specifically is happening during sniffing. And the reason this error happens during sniffing is because our CSV file was too small. In reality, these CSV files are like thousands of lines. And then they sniffer, they only runs like on the, okay, this is like what we detected. So we're good here. Found options that can read these lines. And then you end up with the bad stuff. So for example, if you get the prompt on the first line,
yeah,
and we use that with the sniffer disabled, we can see exactly that behavior. And I think it's maybe also worth mentioning that I refactored all our error messages recently. It's gonna be out in the next release. And now all these error messages, they're all like including the not only the line number, but the original CSV line.
okay.
And also tips on how to fix it, right? So basically, if you would get this error, it would say, hey, okay, like it's missing a column, but maybe you can try no padding or ignore errors. So it also tries to help a bit the user.
Yeah. No, I think again, I think if you get the row number, you get already a lot of work done if it's isolated. But if you get like a quick suggestion, that's even better because I've been there like when reading CSV with different things. It's sometimes difficult to notice on which row there is actually a problem. So here I have the prompt. You want to try this one and
Yeah, so if we copy and paste that and just change there the limiter to the comma, because since we ran out of this sniffer, it gave us like something that
yeah.
it's not good because that's what I use, and the quotes basically to the double quotes. I guess we also have to do.
Yes.
Actually, now that I think about it, the sniffer of course gave us like a lot of wrong things. We also have to
Yeah.
redefine the columns because it's trying to read everything as one column. So we need to also create this struct with like name, varchar, age, integer, and height double.
Yeah. Indeed. So that would look like
Exactly.
this,
Perfect.
and then age in and age double
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So now we get a different error message. So it first shows like the options that were used. It's already giving the possible fixes. So you're using like, oh, you're using the very one latest. Okay. And
Yeah,
then it gives you like a more,
0.10.1. Yeah.
yeah, so I extended this even more like on the one that's gonna come up. But here, for example, it gives us the input error. So now it's CSV error on line 3. So it is our line 3 because we have the header, and it gives us a more precise error there. It's like, okay, so we're expecting a different number of columns.
Wow. Oh, okay. That's super nice. We are really already running out of time. Maybe let's do one more. I would say dirty CSV that works, and maybe explain like what is happening behind the scene. Can you give like another example?
Yeah, so let's maybe make Jane have a height again. So I don't know, just a comma, 1 points,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, and then let's maybe add like a couple dirty lines on the top of the file, just like write like random gibberish. No, before the header.
Yeah.
So this is also something that's pretty common on CSV files, is that you basically have like some kind of, oh, thank you. Uh, so it's you have like a couple of rows that basically do some maybe kind of description of what the file is going to be about. Uh, it's basically, yeah, some kind of gut, right? And then the sniffer can automatically detect that these lines are broken. So if we try to run our sniffer, and then hopefully maybe this time, even if there's a small file, it works nicely.
Wait, you want
Uh,
to? Let's run in the.
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah,
oh, just sorry.
yeah, let's run it this and see what this. Wow, wow.
Yeah, so
It's
basically
completely
behind,
me ignoring that you're awesome. Isn't that hurtful?
I think I've been touching it weirdly. This past few days. Um, no, so yeah, so basically it can like detect to a certain degree that you have this kind of you know wrong rows.
Yeah.
Um, and there's all kinds of other errors you can have on CSV files that we don't really like. For specifically for this case where you're missing a column, we have a way of amending it with
Yeah.
Notepad. But if you have extra columns, I mean, what do you do, right? Like, what does that mean? Which column should we ignore? Or if you have uncoded values, so there's like all this plethora of errors that with the ignore errors, they will hopefully get ignored, and you can still read your CSV file.
Yeah.
uh, so if you want to run a different CSV file, you could even like add a new column and with ignore errors and see this skip, right? So bottom line is, I think these two options, ignore errors and notepadding, really help people to read all sorts like of weird things.
Yeah. That is cool. So let's just recap what we covered here. So and for people watching this and not familiar with DuckDB, I'm just running VS Code. I've installed DuckDB here on my terminal. You can also use DuckDB within a Jupyter notebook with pip install DuckDB, and I'm sending those SQL commands. And we had the CSV file here to play with. Basically, what we did is just a simple CSV. See that without specifying anything, what kind of things is DuckDB doing behind the scene. We used the sniff CSV that I was actually not aware, so I did learn something, because usually the magic happening doesn't need me to go on that function, but now we'll definitely look a bit more. And we tried to broke the CSV in different ways, and so also what kind of error we get, surfaced, which was pretty nice. There was specifically the line code error. If you have one line that's just messed up in your CSV, and here we just like did some stuff on the headers and it's still able to parse it. But be aware you have to sometimes also put ignore errors true, depending on what kind of things will break it, the parser. That's roughly what we cover now. And yeah, it was a fun discussion. I did learn a few things with you, Pedro. What's next on the agenda for your work, and maybe first on the CSV side and just your work in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I did like uh, I did recently quite a huge rework in the way the CSV operates, basically with performance focus, and it was a very interesting. But I think by now we have certain cases that we're kind of like getting bottlenecked by I/O. So for example, if you get the ClickBench CSV file, it just like runs their queries directly on the CSV files, and you get bottlenecked by I/O, which basically means there's nothing really you can do because you're waiting for the thing to be read in memory, right? So I think in performance-wise, for the general case, I'm pretty happy. There's of course optimizations that you can do, like when you're reading CSV files from the internet. So I already have ideas of how to make it a bit faster. When you read the same file multiple times, there are caching ideas that you can implement. So there's still things to be done, but I think for the general case, I'm very happy. What I think is still can be done better is our testing. CSV files, they come in all shapes and forms, and with all different types of errors. And one thing that I think is nice about them is that you know what kind of errors can happen, right? They have a certain limitation on the number of craziness. So you can write a fuzzer that with a certain number of rules can just generate infinitely broken CSV files. And because you generated that, you know where all these errors are, right? So you can validate that your system is probably like properly detecting all of these, properly running. So in my opinion, the next big thing for the CSV file will be robustness. I think that the dream is that it never crashes, that it's always able to read it, even though you get like your whole file as one column. But at least you, as the user, you can like, okay, it's one column. I see how the data looks like. I can use this if function to see what's going wrong and then amend it myself.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like the next big goal there. Yeah.
And for your work itself, are you gonna still focus on this specific thing, or what would you like to work on?
So I mean, we are currently in this stage that we're very much focused on bugs at DuckDB, so we're not really producing that many new features. I've mostly been doing CSV bug fixing, unfortunately. But for me, one of the things that I'm highly interested on is on async IO. And this is something that I noticed from CSV files, but actually touch any kind of files that we go from our file system. It basically means that the access to disk for that file and the actually operations are interleaved. So you can have scenarios where you're not bottlenecked by I/O, but your CPU is not at max usage. Yeah. Basically because your threads are waiting for data unnecessarily. So you can do that asynchronously and for all the files. So that I think is pretty cool because, I mean, it won't get like a 10x performance, but it will highly increase the parallelism. And across like the whole stack. So that's probably like the next big thing that I'll be working on.
Cool. No, that sounds exciting. Like that sounds performance thing that we definitely need on IO. And I think on the parser there is already a lot of good work. And I've been using like DuckDB on the CLI just to do, query in one line a CSV with the DuckDB CLI has been really a refresh for me. Thank you very much, Pedro. And I guess I'll see you around. I'll see you around in Amsterdam, maybe.
Of course.
See you.